big first. Say hi to everybody.
Shit. There it is. I think I got it. Ooh, that black looks deep. I look like I'm in an infinite black screen. Does it look okay to you?
Yeah.
Maybe we should cut off the side lights. I don't know. Well, actually, you tilted the camera too. Oh, there it is. Okay. I didn't know how to squat down. Hey, everybody. Can anybody hear me and see me? That would assume that there is anybody in our Twitch channel right now. Is there anybody in the Twitch? MJ baked up in the hizzle. What's that? Okay. Cool. MJ Baked, great screen name, says hello. Mexican Goose. I don't think I've heard the screen name Mexican Goose before. Welcome, Mexican Goose. It says yes, indeed. Okay, good. That means that we are live and this is working. And so now I will officially kick this off. Welcome, Twitch fans and friends and students of all sorts from all places, whether you're actively at Virginia Tech in one of my classes right now, or former alumni, or just people on planet Earth who'd like to tune in and perhaps learn a thing or two about topics that I, John Boyer, Professor John Boyer here at Virginia Tech, decide to talk about on any given night. I have really gotten into the Twitch stuff this semester. I really like this Twitch platform. I think it is the greatest platform for education. Everybody's tired of the Zoomy Zoom crap anyway. And Facebook and Twitter, why are anybody still doing that stuff? Twitch is the future. Twitch is where it's at. So for those of you that are a first-time chatter from Enzo Rizzo, great screen name. Always tell me to buy followers. Well, thanks, Enzo. I don't have any money on me right now. But Benman says, hey, boy, what's going on, Benman? You don't have to delete them. I don't care. I don't want to delete spammers. Spammers have feelings, too. So, welcome, Benman. So, for those that are really gluttons for punishment and tuned in last night and are tuning in again to see the second part of this, what we're going to do is attempt once more in less than an hour to finish off this presentation about Vladimir Putin. And how I say in less than an hour, I'm really going to try this time to keep it like within a half an hour. And we covered a whole lot of ground last night, so I don't have to backtrack too much. I apologize for anybody who did not watch the Twitch cast last night. You missed about an hour and 45 minutes of Russian history and early Putin career in his first 2 terms as president. But that's going to get us up to where we're starting now. And we're going to start now with Putin invading Russia, and then lead that on up to Putin invading eastern Ukraine, which happened, let's see, 24 hours ago. This is a timely podcast, is it not? Okay. I'm sorry, got some chatters already. Life of Toad, first time chat. Great screen name. Life of Toad says, Boyer had your class in 2007. That's impossible. I'm not that old. Actually, I was teaching way before that. 2007, can we go back to posting the audio from these to podcast apps? That's up to Katie. She's the smart one who does this. Oh, and I see Ashley T98 back in the hizzle and is quoting me is back to the memes. We can do, I don't mind any of this stuff being used for straight audio or just audio or posted to even YouTube or wherever. I don't mind where Katie posted. I only wonder about audio only because I'm so graphics oriented and I talk about maps all the time. But if you think it is a valuable resource to you, Life of Toad, then by all means. Where did you even used to do that at, Katie? You used to post just audio? Cool. She does all the real work here. I have no idea what's going on. So yeah, glad Katie will hook you up with that. Mexican Goose says, I had him a year or two ago as well. Twitch allows you to listen to audio-only versions after it's posted. Oh, thank you, Mexican Goose. I just love that screen name. And now I want faux gras. Okay. But I don't want to keep you guys here forever. We've already burned up 5 minutes having fun. But, that's, again, one of the reasons why I like Twitch. But that makes things so long. This is exactly what used to happen to me, friends, by the way. And A Life of Toad will attest to this. This is exactly what used to happen to me 10 and 20 years ago when I would lecture live. We would never get anywhere in class. I would have all these great lectures planned, and we would never get to any of the stuff and just end up rapping and somehow still learning stuff, I think. Did you guys learn stuff, Mexican Goose? Well, Mexican Goose, you took it online, but Life of Toad, did you learn stuff despite my rambling nature in live lectures? Inky2050 says, I listened to your podcast about EEU, filmed in 2014, and you predicted Russia's carving off of Donetsk. Did I? Damn. Thanks for reminding me, Inky. I can't remember half the stuff I said, but actually it's not that great of a prediction. I mean, who doesn't want to think that they're super smart and they know everything? But I don't pretend to. Again, when you follow world events, when you get a little older, and you follow world events for long enough, things get much easier to predict because you can kind of see where the story's going. And whenever you said 2014, I predicted that. 2014, there were a lot of things in motion that led me to believe that the story was heading in this direction. I was right about the general story, obviously, and this is what's happening today. But any one thing could have intervened and would have stopped that. Had Vladimir Putin died of wrestling a grizzly bear, which is probably the way he will die, put that in your predictions and see if it comes true. If he had died by wrestling a grizzly bear in 2016, then this would not be happening. So all these events are very Putin-based. But I had the storyline right, and because Putin stayed alive and no other major weird things happened, they are now coming to pass. So I won't say I got lucky. It's kind of obvious if you see the bigger story as it's unfolding. Having said that, I'll make some predictions right now, too. I think he's actually going to roll through southern Ukraine. I think he's going to leave part of Ukraine, the capital area, but I'm going to show you a map of voting districts here in a few slides, and I will go on record as saying I think that's the area he's going to take over, but I'm getting ahead of myself, as usual. MJ Bake said that's why your classes were so great. Mexican Goose learned a lot. That's why I'm back. Ashley says live lectures with you would be awesome. These Twitch lives are always informative and interesting. Thank you, Ashley. I would love to be lecturing live again. And if Virginia Tech gets over the mask stuff, which the rest of the world is, I might even try to pull off some live lectures this semester once the mask stuff goes away. I'm a believer in science, folks, by the way. I'm not a denier. I find it a bit of overkill at the current juncture we're in. So that's all I'll say about that. As Forrest Gump would say, and that's all I got to say about that. Now, let's get to this lecture, shall we? So where we left off last night, for those first-time viewers, we did an hour and a half or almost 2 hours, a brief chat about Russia, rebirth of the bear, spasibo, that means hello in Russian, to a whole new century and a brand new bear, all because of a single dude, the single dude named Vladimir Putin, that is. And this new 21st century has gone very right, where the 20th century did not go terribly great for Russia as a whole. And the 1970s, 1980s, and especially into the 1990s were horrifically bad for Russia. And former Soviet Union, which went away because things were so bad. The 21st century has been a rapid turnaround in fortunes because of Putin. What's gone right in the 20th century? In a word, Vladimir Putin. In another word, petroleum, the double P, the Putin and the petroleum. And I finished last night's lecture going through Putin's first 2 terms in office. 2 terms. Remember, he started as the prime minister. He was appointed prime minister in 1999. He officially became president in an election in the year 2000. He was reelected in 2005. Russia used to have 4-year terms for their presidents with a maximum of 2. So from 2000 to 2008, he served his 2 4-year terms. And by the Russian constitution, he was not allowed to be president anymore. But he still is president, so it's obviously something happened. We'll get to that by the end of this lecture. So President of Russia 2000, oil is expensive as hell. The government coffers of Russia were filling up with money. He crushed the Chechens in a second war, which was very brutal and gained him popularity. He crushed massive terror. He openly, basically on TV, crushed terrorist activity brutally. Crushed the oligarchy who challenged him in any way. Took back a lot of the Russian resources that the oligarchy had stolen. Crushed the press who challenged him. Renationalized critical industries, namely the big chunks of the oil industry and the entire press, all run by the Russian government now. Basically, he put Russia's house in order, and because of all these things, and maybe a variety of other things, like all the topless pictures of him, his approval ratings in 2008, 75%, conservatively, 75% of Russians loved him. Might have been 90% for all we know. And for those that say, well, they control all the news, therefore they control all the polls, so that's probably false, I would disagree. I believe these polling numbers for Putin, I believe, are fairly accurate. They just are, and from a variety of sources. And there's nothing going on. While there are protest movements sporadically in Russia, and there is an opposition movement, and there are probably plenty of Russians that don't like this guy. Overall, in the first 8 years, wildly popular. Okay? So, meanwhile, back at NATO headquarters during 2000 to 2008, and this is something we talked about a couple weeks ago if you tuned into the Ukrainian invasion imminent ? That I did 2 weeks ago. We've now answered that question. It was imminent. Yes, it happened. Meanwhile, back at NATO, during this exact same time period that Vladimir Putin's taking over Russia and getting its house in order, remember, NATO is expanding. All of these countries lit up in the greens here, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland. All these places used to be either part of Soviet Union or puppet states of Soviet Union. And after the Soviet Union collapses in 1991, these states all become independent, and many of them join NATO. Why would you join NATO? For precisely the same reason Ukraine really wishes it was in NATO right now. All of them feared retribution or the re-rise of Russia at a future point in which Russia would take them back over again. This is exactly why all these states joined NATO, and more wanted to join, because by 2015, now you have big parts of the former Yugoslavia that have joined NATO. And it is important to note, again, something I talked about in a previous lecture, note to self, both Ukraine and Georgia were being courted to join NATO, mostly by the United States. As early as, in the slide, I say 2003, 2004. Actually, it was more like 2000, 2001, 2002. Very early on, when all these other states were joining NATO, both Ukraine and Georgia were saying, hey, we might like to be part of NATO too. This is an absolutely critical part of understanding Vladimir Putin and understanding what Russia is doing today. They have felt encircled and threatened by NATO since the start. Hell, it was the basis for the whole Cold War. NATO versus the Warsaw Pact Soviet-led countries in the standoff of pre-World War III. And so when the Soviet Union went away, the Soviets, by the way, which became the Russians, expected that, well, the Cold War's over now. There's no reason to even have NATO. We got rid of our Warsaw Pact. There's no reason to have NATO. You only built NATO because you said we were threatening you. Well, we're gone now. Russia has been exceptionally upset about not only the maintenance of NATO, but the obvious growth of NATO right up to their borders. And I say that Georgia and Ukraine were being courted to join NATO, which was a bridge too far for Russia. Even before Vladimir Putin really got the country up and running again, it was voiced opposition from Russia, from all officials in Russia, of Ukraine and Georgia joining NATO. They were saying, hey, this is not cool. This is growing too fast. What are you guys doing? The Cold War is over. Why are you adding countries coming up to our border that might have weapons in them pointed at us? Why are you guys doing this? I don't care if you agree or disagree with Russia's opinion here, or agree or disagree with Russia's worries about NATO. I just want you to recognize they had them, and they still have those worries. And this is one of the main things that's motivating Vladimir Putin to do the things that he's doing. You may say, well, he's just a dictator and he just wants to take over the world. that's an oversimplification. You really need to understand the threat that Vladimir Putin personally feels that NATO is. Even if we're on the good guy side, right? So we're like, but NATO's the good guys. We're not ever going to do anything. But that's because you're on that side. You can't assume that the opposition thinks you're good guys and are never going to do anything. So they've always looked at the growth of NATO as a significant threat to their security. The main threat to their security. Okay. Ashley says, we don't social... Oh, I say we're going back to live lectures. Don't social distance so the masks feel like they aren't doing much to me. Don't come to class or work when you're sick. Boom, wash your hands. I agree. Why did Ukraine not join NATO? Very good question, Ashley. Because they were in a state of turmoil themselves. Not everyone in Ukraine wanted to join NATO. Many people, I'll just say, people like in Donetsk wanted to partner up with Russia more. Strange how that happens, right? So the country wasn't of a mind in and of itself. NATO, many NATO members said, we're not so sure about this. This was really pushed hard by the United States. Germany and France were like, you guys are pushing Russian buttons a little too hard here. And the Ukrainian military might not have been up to snuff. You have to meet certain standards of both governance, your political system, and your military preparedness in order to join NATO. So I think it was a variety of, they weren't really ready, the country wasn't of a singular mind, and other NATO members were hesitant because they saw an inevitable fight coming with Russia, one that we're dealing with right this second. Let's see. Benman says, why would Russia feel threatened by a defensive organization? Are they afraid it will turn into an offensive organization? Absolutely, Benman. Spoken very well. Russia says, hey, you guys claim you're just defensive, but what good does that do when you have your NATO members going all the way up to our border, and you could put nuclear missiles in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. If Ukraine joined, you could put them literally 2 minutes from Moscow. Hell, maybe 60 seconds. What, from the Russian perspective, what good does it do for you to claim you're a defensive organization when you're so close to us? We'd be dead before we could defend ourselves should you ever change your mind and become offensive. That's their primary motivation here, or their worry. Ashley says, well, clearly these states need NATO to prevent being taken over by Russia, to be protected by Russia. Correct. So why would they have why would they have dissolved NATO? That's why they didn't. All these countries wanted to join NATO knowing this day would eventually come. And they were correct. And that's why a lot of people in Ukraine and Georgia were like, man, I wish we'd have joined when we had a chance, when Russia was weak. Remember, NATO grew when Russia was weak. Russia is no longer weak. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing a recalibration. We're seeing a rebalancing in Eastern Europe based on Putin wanting to get back to what he and Russians consider stability in this peripheral zone. This is the Russian periphery, the edge. And they worry about that edge, and they want to see it tilted. Again, I'm not defending them, but the Russians would say, look, we're not trying to take over all of Eastern Europe. We're trying to reestablish balance in our periphery. And Vladimir Putin might say, hey, look, United States, you guys got all uppity when we tried to move nuclear missiles to Cuba. Cuba's not your country. What were you worried about? What were you worried about? It's just nuclear missiles. It's not even in your country. And the answer is because it's really close to your country. And so you don't like that. And we Russians don't like it either when you might put nuclear weapons or any conventional weapons in countries right next door to us. Make sense? Okay. Jor Machine says maybe if Russia would become a real democracy, then it wouldn't have to worry about the West bombing them. Well, point taken. Maybe Russia will decide to become a democracy. Okay. Meanwhile, so NATO's growing, adding on members in successive waves in 1999 and 2004 and 2008. Meanwhile, what else is also happening in what used to be Russian Soviet territory, or at least the periphery? There was an explosion of what we call color revolutions. There was an orange revolution in Ukraine, a rose revolution in Georgia, the tulip revolution in Kyrgyzstan, although I don't know that much about that one. Those are the main ones to think about because, again, all of these revolutions I just mentioned are in former Soviet republics. They used to be part of Soviet Union. They became independent. And while they were independent since 1991, they still, most of them had pro-Russian leaders, sometimes outright ethnically Russian people who were still running those countries. And these revolutions, in part, were based on kind of becoming real democracies and kind of throwing out the Russian influence once and for all. Before I go any further, let me go ahead and cut to like 30 slides from now, where Vladimir Putin on more than one occasion has said, I'm going to put a stop to the color revolutions. I don't want any color revolutions happening around here. He's made no bones about it. He looks at these color revolutions as a very significant threat to Russian security as well, because he does not want to see anybody getting too uppity within Russia. So the whole Ukrainian Orange Revolution that saw them purging out pro-Russian elements and embracing democracy and wanting to join the EU and NATO, that was very threatening to Putin. He was very unhappy in the year 2004. And the same thing with Georgia in 2003, a year earlier. Real, true pro-democracy elements that wanted to lean towards the West came into power, and he wanted to do anything to stop those things. And lo and behold, 2 of the 4 color revolutions listed on this map have now been invaded by Russian forces. Surprise! Again, it's not, if you follow these events, they're not really that shocking. I'll come back to that, though. So I think maybe it's worth spending 60 seconds on 2 slides that have way too much text, just so you understand the Ukrainian situation and Vladimir Putin's mind. Remember, this is all about Vladimir Putin. I want you to get what motivates him, especially here in Ukraine. So the Orange Revolution, a series of protests and political events in 2004 to 2005. The 2 guys you see up in the corner were running for president. It was Victor Y versus Victor Y. Why ask why? Yushchenko versus Yanukovych. Guess which one was pro-Russia? The Yanukovych was. So Viktor Yushchenko was a pro-Western guy from the west side of Ukraine, and Viktor Yanukovych was a pro-Russian guy from the eastern side of Ukraine, where there was a lot of ethnic Russians. And so the election went down. It was largely called fake. Well, not fake, but tainted. Some people cheated. Yanukovych won, but then there was an uprising as people said, there's no way in hell this guy won. Massive protest, peaceful protest, by the way. And the Supreme Court of Ukraine said, you're right. We think there was some funny business here. Redo the election. They redid the election. The pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko won that election. And this really kind of heated up the battle. Remember, this is only 2004, 2005. Putin is still putting Russia's house in order. So he's very unhappy about this Orange Revolution, but he is not yet in a position to do much about it. Certainly, Russia was funding pro-Russian folks within Ukraine. Certainly, Russia was funding and supporting Viktor Yanukovych's political platform. They wanted him to win because he was going to become a pro-Russian puppet, okay? Certainly those things were happening behind the scenes. And that's not even bad. You know, governments support candidates they want in elections around the world. Certainly, by the way, Russia had something to do with the poisoning of Viktor Yushchenko. This is a picture of the same guy before and after. During the campaign, he was poisoned by a drug that it was known that the KGB used to use to poison people. This is back in 2004, 2005. Some of you were very young at that point. But have you heard any stories about other people being poisoned around the world in the last just 5 to 10 years? That people link back to drugs developed to poison people by the KGB? So you had this going on in the background. I should say the foreground of this election. Everybody knew that Russia had their hands in this election. And then they won it. Yanukovych won, but then it was overthrown and the pro-Western guy got in there. And this must have been maddening for Vladimir Putin, especially because the guy, right after he won, seeks EU membership. Yushchenko came out and said, we would like to make democratic reforms irreversible. We want Ukraine to be a vibrant democracy. We want EU membership. And by the way, we wouldn't mind getting into NATO. So this is infuriating to Vladimir Putin. One cannot but think that Vladimir Putin is sitting in the Kremlin chuckling right now, 17 years later, that he is finally getting back to right what he sees as a big historic affront to him personally with the Orange Revolution happening in Ukraine. He was very unhappy about this. That's what happened then. But to at least wrap up the Ukrainian thing, I do want to point out that this is a ethno-linguistic map of Ukraine. The red is areas that are mostly Ukrainian speaking, ethnically Ukrainian as well. The yellow is predominantly Russian speaking, and the yellow hatchet is ethnically significant Russian ethnicity. And the Crimean Peninsula you see down there in brown is predominantly ethnic Russian majority. So you have an east-west divide in Ukraine that is the center of what's going on right here. And remember, I told you like 5 minutes ago, I'm going to show you a map and predict where I think Putin is going to go. This is where I think he's going to go. Putin is now, sorry to cut to the end of the lecture already, but Putin is now basically following through on a pledge he made back in 2014 that he's going to protect Russians everywhere. Didn't say protect Russian citizens. A Russian citizen is a person who lives in the state of Russia. You might be ethnically Mongolian, but if you live in Russia, you're a Russian citizen. That makes sense? He made a point to say 7 years ago, I'm going to protect ethnically Russian people everywhere. So if we look at this ethno-linguistic map of Ukraine, where are the ethnically Russian people at? Well, the two regions that Putin invaded yesterday, they're mostly ethnically Russian, but all that southern area and the Crimean Peninsula, of course, which he already owns. I'll come back to this map. But the fun was not over yet for Ukraine. Let me wrap this up really quickly just for Ukraine. They had another election for the next election cycle in 2010. And lo and behold, the same pro-Russian guy, Yanukovych, who lost in 2004, was actually elected legitimately in 2010. So they went from a pro-Western leader, legitimately elected, to a pro-Russian leader, legitimately elected. And pro-Russian Yanukovych became Yushchenko's successor in this bizarre twist of fate. And now we can look at another map, which I think even further defines. In both of actually all three of the last elections in Ukraine, this is pretty much how it's gone. The blue areas, no matter who's running, the blue areas are pro-Western, pro-EU, pro-NATO. Mostly ethnically Ukrainians speak Ukrainian as their primary language. All the red areas of Ukraine are majority ethnic Russian or minority ethnic Russian and speak Russian as a first language and are pro-Russian. So what you have is this divided country in so many ways. And I'm saying, look at this map closely for 2 seconds. It would not shock me at all if Vladimir Putin went ahead and said, well, I'm here to protect Russians in Donetsk. And, well, look, there's other Russians over in these other red areas on this map. I guess while we're here, we'll go ahead and protect those Russians too. They already took Crimean Peninsula. So you're starting to see that Putin is chipping away at southeastern Ukraine, kind of state by state. And he now is legitimizing all this by saying, I'm protecting Russians. And at this point, why would you stop? If you're protecting Russians, then you have to go ahead and take all the areas that are mostly ethnically Russian people in Ukraine. That puts him, by the way, all the way over to a place called Moldova, the country right there to the west. And Moldova has a little strip of ethnic concentration called Transnistria. And the Transnistrians have a pro-Russian, want to join Russian political group in them. So to me, he's going to sweep right over there and take over Transnistria. And what the hell, Moldova's small. He might take that too. So I'm now making some pretty radical predictions. But based on his ideology here and his movements, it would not surprise me. And now hopefully it won't surprise you if indeed they do take that whole southeastern chunk of Ukraine and parts of then Moldova. Okay? But the fun's not over for Ukraine yet. Because 4 years after the pro-Russian guy was elected, and when he came into power, he said, no, I'm turning to pivot. We should be part of Russia. or at least we should be partners with Russia, and I'm not going to join the EU, and I'm telling you we're not joining NATO no matter what. This caused internal dissent. There was more protest in 2014. The Euromaidan clashes erupted, and these were not peaceful. Lots of people died, and it really started to divide the country. And this is where you've had now since 2014 basically a state of civil war within Ukraine for battle of control of the country. They ran this Yanukovych guy out of the country, or actually he just left. He's living in Russia right now. Shocking, I know. Fled to Russia. And he's been there ever since, maybe waiting to return to lead the Donetsk and Luhansk regions of formerly Ukraine. And Putin and his ilk look at what happened. They're like, dudes, you guys say you're pro-democracy, but you actually elected that Yanukovych guy. And then you threw him out of power violently. He was the legitimately elected dude. You guys are anti-democratic. They were actually called fascist. Get this, the Russians are calling the pro-democracy protesters fascist for throwing Viktor Yanukovych out of power. And subsequently, they have more of a pro-Western president right this second. You've probably seen him on TV, but he's quickly losing power. So that's what happened, and that's why you've had a on-again, off-again Russia-Ukrainian war that's already been happening in eastern Ukraine ever since 2014. The two areas that Vladimir Putin recognized as independent are these areas right here on this map, Luhansk and Donetsk, that are primarily Russian people that have been occupied by pro-Russian forces or perhaps even covertly by Russian military since 2014. Certainly the Russian military has been funneling in money and guns to these pro-Russian separatist or terrorist or whatever you want to call them. That's what's been happening all in the background that hopefully gets you to understand what's going on in Ukraine right now. But let's get back to Putin. How did he get to this point of doing all this stuff in eastern Ukraine? Oh, I'm sorry. I see some chatters. Let's see. Mexican Goose says, so is he happy to be Putin? People in their place. Boom. Mexican Goose, you are knocking it out of the park. I saw your comments too, Ashley, about the fact that he killed Yushchenko and many other people in the public eye he deemed a threat. Many reporters in Russia have ended up dead. So, yeah, don't ever think that I'm promoting this guy as one of my heroes. I actually am freedom of press kind of guy. So there has been shady shit happening in Russia all this time that will continue to happen. Let's see. First time chatter from Victor Tango. Ooh, Victor Tango. VT, Victor Tango. Yes, I know the military alphabet. Victor Tango 16 says, 2 Russian BTGs already garrisoned in Transnistria too. Boom. Just mentioned Transnistria. Thank you, Victor Tango. Ashley says, Ukraine voted him in. Wouldn't they have known he would want to be part of EU and NATO? Yes. He was legitimately, that is, Yanukovych, the second time he ran for president, was legitimately elected. And at that point, in 2010, things were not going well in Ukraine economically. And so there was a backlash against the pro-Western crew that led to the pro-Russian guy getting back into power. It was legit. But then he made things way worse. That's why people had an uprising. Kobar25 says Transnistria also has a ton of older Russian missiles and still has a sizable troop presence. Boom, all these people know about Transnistria. How many Americans know about Transnistria? I think we're all here in this chat room right now. I'm so proud of you guys. Is it possible that Russia may bolster that area and then go for a pincer attack on southern Ukraine? Boom, Kobar. You just took the words right out of the mouth. First time chatter from Geography Lady. Great screen name. But only occupied by Russians because of Russification. Correct? Geography Lady. Everybody here knows about Transnistria. My work here is done. I should just hang on. Drinking a nice Georgian white wine right now in celebration that they just got invaded in 2008. And that's what we're getting back to, because let's get it back in time. I said from 2000 to 2008, Putin spent most of his time putting Russia's house in order. And now his house was in order. And now it's time for Soviet reunion. I can never get enough of that meme. Okay. And now we can start to see the Vladimir Putin playbook out in the open for the first time, that's going to be reinforced on multiple plays right on up into the present day / yesterday. And we can now predict what's going to happen in the future with the same playbook. Playbook number 1. And by the way, if you haven't picked up on this yet, the playbook is there are Russian people there. We have to go protect the Russian people. That is the playbook. And he has been loyal to that playbook since he invented it. And it started in 2008. Do keep in mind, I had already tipped you off that both Ukraine and Georgia, this country here on the map, were being courted to join NATO and or the EU. Both countries had sizable populations within them who wanted to do that. Both countries had a color revolution that brought pro-democratic, pro-Western people into power. And so, surprise, surprise, to no one, these are the two targets that Putin picked first. And he was probably strategically doing stuff behind the scenes the whole time. The leader of Georgia after the color revolution was this guy, President Saakashvili. Great name to say. And Saakashvili was a fairly confident dude, maybe he still is, that really thought that NATO and or the West would come to his defense. And so he actually thumbed his nose at Putin quite a bit. He really pissed off Putin on multiple occasions. I won't go into all of them, but it was made clear that he was not going to fall in line when Putin said, hey, you should be looking to us. You should partner with us. And he's like, hell no. In fact, we want to join NATO. So Saakashvili from the get-go infuriated Putin. So when this happened in 2008, and it happened on the first day of the Olympics, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Vladimir Putin was actually in China for the Beijing Olympics on the opening night. And I remember them filming him in the stadium, and he took a phone call. And everybody's like, that's funny. He's taking a phone call during the Olympics. And come to find out, it was the phone call of him giving the order to invade Georgia. And what were the pretenses for this? Well, this little area you see on the map called South Ossetia, kind of an ethnic enclave of Ossetian people. There's a North Ossetia on the other side of the border there in Russia. And so ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union, Georgia went its own way. And actually, Chechnya wanted to go its own way, and Dagestan wanted to go its own way, and North Ossetia wanted to go its own way. But Russia held on to those territories on the north side of the Caucasian mountain range. But South Ossetia became part of a free Georgia. But there were ethnic Russians there and South Ossetians there, Ossetians who had been petitioning for independence. So there was actually some Russian military who kind of hung out there for reasons which I still don't quite understand. And they said, well, it wasn't a military base, but there was elements of Russian military who'd stayed there literally all throughout the 90s to protect Russian property, perhaps, or Russian citizens, perhaps. There was also a small contingent of Russians up in the little area called Abkhazia, right there on the Black Sea. The Black Sea is super important for Russia because that's where its entire navy is. So there was a small port and facility and a group of ethnic Russians up in northern Abkhazia. So what happened in 2008 after Saakashvili pissed off Putin enough is that somebody was throwing some rocks, there was gunfire, there was kind of uprisings that had happened sporadically in South Ossetia that the Georgian military would have to come put down. And apparently somebody shot some guns off. There was some counter fire. It escalated. The Georgian military came in and said physically, okay, we're putting this down. Some people died. And in the process, apparently a Russian military person, perhaps a Russian citizen, I don't know, but obviously an ethnic Russian somebody, was either shot and or killed. And Vladimir Putin said, gotta go protect Russians! So they sent in a full invasion force into South Ossetia. And while nothing at all had happened in Abkhazia, they sent some military in there too and seized the properties and then said, by the way, I, Vladimir Putin, and the Russian Federation recognize the independence of South Ossetia. We also recognize the independence of Abkhazia. Let me stop the tape there for a second, friends. Does that sound familiar to you at all? Does that sound familiar? Because it should. That's what Vladimir Putin did yesterday. February 21st, 2022, he just did the same thing in eastern Ukraine. I'm sorry, I got some chatters in here. People who like to watch history and current events, Twitch streams are the people I know what Transnistria is, and other world topics most Americans don't. That is correct, Ashley. I'm really glad that you all like to listen to me talk about Transnistria. And Geography Lady says, what about the EU? How does that play into this? Hang on, Geography Lady. I've got a slide coming for you in just a minute. So that's when Russia basically said, we are back. Step off. We have put our internal house in order, and now we're not afraid to exert military power outside of Russia, right? That's kind of a big deal. Now, I really thought this Transnistria shout-out was going to have to wait for this slide, but everybody in here is so wicked smart and cut to the chase. Where else are potential flashpoints for the Russian military? And by the way, this map is almost 20 years old. I intentionally keep old graphics sometimes because I'm like, oh, I used this in class like 20 years ago. And flashpoints back then were all these places where there are ethnic Russians, maybe minorities, sometimes sizable minorities of ethnic Russians, and or places that the Russian military occupies and or might want to take over. So you see Chechnya lit up, you see Georgia lit up, Abkhazia and the South Ossetia were lit up. This is before this invasion. Crimea is lit up, which has now been taken over by Russia. And there's that Transdniester area that most people don't know about. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are still the ones that worry me the most. I really feel like something bad's going to eventually happen there. And I love those countries. They're beautiful. I've been to them. So I'm holding my cards that Putin's going to leave those alone. Kobar25 says, Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova all flat out refused to join the EU. I assume that's why they're the biggest targets. Not a bad assumption. They did flat out refuse to join the EU. But let's get to that EU, shall we? Oh, by the way, why are those places in pink right there? Why are they potential flashpoints for potential Russian military aggression from a 15-year-old map? Because, as I keep stressing, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it left a bunch of ethnic Russians in other countries. So in the fail swoop of a pen with the dissolution of the USSR, now you have millions of ethnically Russian people who are now in another country that's not Russia. By the way, look where some of the biggest red patches are. Kazakhstan's got a ton of ethnic Russians. But look over there at the Crimean Peninsula. It's mostly ethnic Russians. And then look at the little dots in eastern Ukraine and all the way up in Belarus and especially in Latvia. There are big enclaves of ethnic Russians in all of these places. So any place that has a lot of ethnic Russians should be slightly worried now about what Vladimir Putin is enacting on a much more forceful stage than ever before. H. Tree says, it is a coincidence that your map creates a land bridge between Mother Russia to Crimea. Well, it's not intended to. I think that's just the map. It's an old map. But yeah, they have long wanted to join that with a bridge. So maybe it was taking that into account. Maybe it was a wish list. And Ashley says, very optimistic, hopes he'll leave Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania alone. I think so, too. I hope I'm not being too optimistic. But let's go with the playbook number 2, though. Because we're already 40 minutes in. We're not doing bad for 40 minutes in. We might get this in an hour. Playbook number 2. Work the first time, do it again. Exacerbate the Ukrainian civil war, which I've now already covered. That's what Putin and the Russian military have been doing since 2014. Destabilizing the area, funneling in money and guns to pro-Russian separatists / rebels / terrorists. Depends on their name, depends on what side of this conflict you're on. So the Russians say, hey, it's a bunch of pro-Russian, ethnically Russian people who want to side back up with us. We should help them. And they have been covertly helping them right up until they took it over yesterday. Playbook number 3, while you're destabilizing eastern Ukraine, because in 2014 they perhaps didn't want to take it over just as yet. Maybe they weren't ready for that yet. But they were ready to take back the Crimean Peninsula, which is a crown jewel for Russia, and it has been for a very long time. It is where the majority of the Russia's navy is. So even though the Crimean Peninsula became part of an independent Ukraine back in 1991, most of Crimean Peninsula was still being leased by Russia. That's right. It was a long-term 100-year lease because they had their big naval bases there. One may ask, how is that possible that a big military would lease land somewhere else and have a military base that wasn't even in their country? I would say, well, look at Cuba. There's a place called Guantanamo Bay. Look at U.S. military bases all across Europe. We lease those lands too. So this is not an unheard of situation. However, Crimea has always been the sparkle in the Russians' eyes. It is a vacation area. It's on the Black Sea. It's where the rich and famous go buy mansions. It's where the military is, the Navy. So this has always been a big deal to Russia. This is a very stinging loss when it became part of Ukraine back in 1991. Remember, when Russia is weak, and they're not weak anymore. So they're destabilizing 2013, 2014. They're destabilizing Eastern Ukraine after the Euromaidan stuff. Things are active and hot over there, and then they swoop in and annex the Crimean Peninsula outright in March of 2014. By the way, they're using the playbook. This is the third time's the charm on the playbook. They didn't just send the Russian military. Au contraire, they still claim to this day that the Russian military wasn't involved at all. It just so happens that a whole shit ton of guys in green uniforms with guns and no badges, no insignia, no flag, but a shit ton of them somehow appeared on the Crimean Peninsula and took over the government and then held an election in which they said, hey, Crimea, do you want to become part of Russia? And the Crimeans said, yes, of course we do. And thus it became part of Russia. Victor Tango, back in the hills, was saying Finland gave Russia quite a bloody nose in World War II. Curious how that's viewed by both sides today. Interesting you say that, Victor Tango. I've heard two different news stories in the last 48 hours about Finland reconsidering NATO membership in light of what's going on. Right? Muham in the house said, could NATO/US cut off all access from the Baltic and Dardanelles for Russia military/commercial shipping, or would that be a bridge too far? Pun intended. Yes, that would be a bridge/strait of water too far. Remember, the Dardanelles are controlled by Turkey. True, Turkey is a NATO member, but currently Turkey is a not great NATO member. It's an unreliable partner that actually has been buying weaponry from Russia in the last few years and is becoming quite independent in its own right under its autocratic leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So no one knows what direction Turkey's going in right now, although they are none too happy about the Russia's taking over of eastern Ukraine. So there's been kind of a bro fest, love fest happening between the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the last 5 years, they've been getting really cozy, which is really weird because the countries have fought multiple wars against each other and don't like each other. But that might change because Recep's changing his tune as of yesterday, saying, whoa, what's going on here? He is now starting to feel the pinch that, Russia might take over the entire Black Sea. What does that mean for Turkey? Nothing good, I'll tell you that. So that's going on in the background. Let me press on the playbook, though. Oh, I do love this graphic from back in 2014. The Russian bear. Of course I'm hungry. I've been hibernating since 1991, and now I'm back. Okay, and Vladimir Putin stirred the pot even more during this time, during the seizure of Crimea and during the civil war in eastern Ukraine by offering joint Russian-Ukrainian passports. Willingly said, anybody in Ukraine who wants a Russian passport, you got it. No questions asked. We'll deliver it to you. Now, why would anybody do that? Think that through. It's a very clever ruse. Not even a ruse. It's a very clever ploy. If he could have gotten 100,000, and maybe they did, 100,000, 500,000 Ukrainian citizens to apply for a Russian passport, that strengthens his hand that these are Russian people in this area that's claiming to be Ukraine. So well played. I actually don't know how many people took it up, his offer, but it was offered to millions. Anybody of any ethnic Russian at all could get an instant passport, go across the border anytime you want. Pretty interesting. It's fascinating. I love this little thing with the fishing pole. Let's get him. Come on. Take the bait. And now that brings us to, I have one more thing before I get back to taking the bait. And actually, I see a bunch of comments. Okay. Ashley said it might be too outright, so that would really cause a full-scale war. Correct, Ashley. I think that would cause any messing around with the Black Sea or the Dardanelles or the Straits or the shipping. That's called a choke point. So a small area of ocean, open ocean, that is strategically allowed open for the world for trade. It's called a choke point because it narrows and you can choke it off. Any power could legitimately take over this choke point and then disrupt world shipping. And that would cause way too much disruption and probably a lot of world powers getting involved, perhaps in a warlike fashion. Ashley says, I love that Turkey likes Russia so much, but they're primarily Islamic. So you think they have issues with how Russia treats their Islamic citizens? One would think that too. H. Muham says, I was in the class of 2014 when Russia took over Crimea, the little green men. Oh, yeah, that's right. They called them little green men. Thank you, Muham. Little green men were kind of funny in how they replied to journalists. I totally forgot. Everybody just kept saying, they're not soldiers of Russia as far as we can tell. It's just a bunch of little green men who are here. And we were like, what, Martians? Okay, this is now crucially important, super crucial important to understanding Vladimir Putin. When all this is happening, especially the Crimean seizure, he addressed the Ukrainian crisis and the seizure of Crimea as basically this final playing card telling the West and everybody else, we are now not even afraid to take territory outright. Okay? More importantly, and I think this is of the greatest importance, the most important thing to understand Putin is this speech he gave in March 2014, literally a month after they took over Crimean Peninsula. I'm sorry, Crimea Peninsula voted to become part of Russia, whichever. Okay? And of this quote, of this speech he gave, impassioned speech, people were like tears in their eyes. He's talking about Russian pride, and we're back, and we're powerful, and we're awesome, and we're a force for good. We're one of the major powers on planet Earth, and we're back after our embarrassing era of dissolution of the Soviet Union. Here is the line I pluck out of this. Quote, I would like to make it clear to all. This country, Russia, will continue to actively defend the rights of Russians, our compatriots abroad, using the entire range of available means, from political and economic to operations under international humanitarian law, and the right of self-defense. That, my friends, sums up the playbook. Remember, you could be ethnically Finnish, ethnically Kazakh, ethnically Mongolian, ethnically Chinese. And if you lived in Russia, you would be a Russian citizen. And every sovereign state has sovereign rights to do anything they want to those citizens and protect those citizens. What Putin is saying is completely different, and it goes old school, like 200 years ago old school, like old age of empires old school. Putin has said in 2014, we are here to protect our tribe of Russians no matter where they're at. It doesn't matter what country they're in. They're ethnically Russians. It's my duty to protect them. That is the playbook, my friends. That's the playbook. With an entire range of available means, as underlined by Ashley. That is correct. So Putin pledges to protect ethnic Russians anywhere. So where are they? Here's just a variant of the map I showed earlier of percentage Russians. The darker the red, the more ethnic Russians are there. And you see sizable portions of Russians in Kazakhstan particularly. Some in Tajikistan, which is not on this map. All of eastern Ukraine that we're talking about. All of Belarus. Chunks of Latvia and Estonia. Very problematic for Latvia and Estonia since they are part of NATO and part of the EU. Will Putin try to make a play there and suggest that at any given point, and here's the playbook now, by the way. It's easy to tell what's going to happen in the future because you know the playbook. First time chatter from H. Rinker says, hey guys, what's up, H. Rinker? Here's the playbook. So now it's easy to predict events in the future. When you hear about, let's say, there's a anti-government protest in Estonia, Or let's pick Latvia. There's an anti-government protest in Latvia because some ethnic Russians are getting picked on, or ethnic Russians protest because Latvia bans the use of Russian language in schools. I'm just making these headlines up. It doesn't matter because somebody will make them up. And at that point, even if the ethnic Russians within Latvia were to suggest we're being picked on, the government doesn't like us, we're not getting home loans, we got bullied, we got picked on, or God forbid somebody gets shot or a couple people get shot. Maybe they're criminals and they're robbing a store and they get shot, but they end up being ethnic Russians. Vladimir Putin has now given himself the power to go invade Latvia to protect the two guys who were robbing a TV store because they were ethnic Russians. Now, that's a crazy scenario I'm painting. But do you understand how it's actually not that crazy at all? That's what he's been doing. It's the playbook. And again, here's the map we saw of other ethnic Russians. Now back to Geography Lady and a couple others who pointed out, what about the EEU, the Eurasian Union? Because the playbook is protect Russians. Now, whether Putin truly believes this in his heart of hearts, that he has the God-given duty to protect Russians, or he's using this as part of a playbook to rebuild Russia's influence in its periphery, doesn't matter to me. The result's the same. He could truly believe it. He could truly just be playing it. But he is using this playbook. But it's not the only thing. He's done a couple of side hustle alternative plays to try to coax those peripheral areas into coming back into Russia's orbit. And one of them was the Eurasian Union. Back in 2014, again, shocking. Look at the timelines here. All these events I'm talking about all are happening 2014 or thereabouts. And this is when the Euromaidan thing is going south in Ukraine. And they're seizing Crimea. And all of these things are happening. Putin creates a Eurasian Union, a counter, an alternative to the European Union with Russia at its center. These are the countries that were invited, as several of you even pointed out. Ukraine and Georgia basically said, nope. Well, actually, Ukraine did not at the time because Viktor Yanukovych was in charge. So he said maybe. But Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, they said, no thanks. We're all good. It's almost to this point like, hey, you're going to be my girlfriend, right? So we're dating now. And if you don't, then I'm going to beat you up. I mean, I'm giving you incentive. And remember, the little passports. Remember, I'm also giving passports away over in Ukraine. We have an alternative, the EU. You want to join this group over here. You already have a bunch of pro-Russian ethnic people who want to join us. And now we're going to give you passports. And we have this Eurasian Union. It's going to be super cool. They were already part of the SCO, this strategic Shanghai Cooperation Organization that spans all of Eurasia. Russia and China are the central cores of it, but it includes all of the Central Asian countries. So that's a secondary trade / maybe morphing into a military bloc that Russia is in. So it's looking for its future in the East and trying to pull its old periphery back into its orbit, right? Whoops, let me do that. Let's go to, and here's all the countries in it right now. Mongolia, Iran, India, and even Pakistan are actually cooperative partners that may eventually join this bloc. No one's really sure where this bloc is going. It's kind of economic mostly, but they've actually done some joint military drills, and given the recent warm-up between China and Russia, that could become more of a military bloc in and of its own right, depending on what China wants to do. It's really all about China. If China says we want to make this the new NATO, then it will become the new NATO, and Russia would be thrilled. But I don't know that they're there yet. Okay? Also, side hustle alternative plays as I do a rapid-fire round to finish this off. Putin expands military power abroad via traditional old-school military methods. Again, now 2004, now we're in 2015. Russia gets involved in the Syrian civil war to prop up its old ally, President Bashar Assad. All right? So this is unthinkable 10 years early. In 2004, 2005, Russia is still too weak. Its military is regaining ground, but it's not ready for foreign adventurism. It's not ready to go help other places in in what could become embroiled, chaotic, never-ending conflicts, but Russia does. Why? Because it can. And it's showing that it's back as an international power player. At the same time, I can go past that. Most folks thought that Putin was outplaying Trump in the Middle East because Trump said we're going to get out of the Middle East, and we did. Actually, even before Trump got into office, the U.S. was getting disinterested in the Middle East and started pulling stuff out. So, and that as the U.S. is pulling out, Russia starts moving in, and it's now probably on equal footing with the U.S. for influence in many parts of the Middle East that used to be pro-U.S. all the way. In 2017, I remember reporting in class the huge military exercise that happened with Russia and Belarus. They did a war games, and the war game was, we're going to pretend that NATO invades Belarus. Or that NATO launches missiles from Estonia. And so they had this gigantic military buildup where they did all these great weapons and had tanks and did all this great fun war stuff that guys like to do. And that was matched a year later with Russia's biggest war games since the Cold War ended, with a huge mobilization. It just keeps rolling. It was basically a calling card to the world that said, hey, we're not only back, not only have we now invaded multiple countries, taken over the Crimean Peninsula, but we're doing the biggest war games on the planet, showing off our military prowess, showing off our new jets and our new fighters. I forgot to even put in a story that Russia has like the biggest conventional bomb. They have the biggest non-atomic weapon. The thing could blow up Manhattan and it's not atomic. It's a huge super bomb. Once creaky and bankrupt, Russia's military by 2014, 15, 16, 17 is back at its prior fighting weight. It is all in. They've invested billions in rebuilding the Russian military. And why would they do that, I wonder? Because of the playbook. It's part of the playbook. Project power, right? Another side hustle, alternative play. Putin develops and fosters the most effective cyber army on planet Earth. An unforeseen army. No one's ever put this much effort into it. Yes, Russia had spies in the Cold War. U.S. had spies. Israel has spies. China has spies. Everybody has covert stuff happening. And everybody hacks each other too, or at least tries. Russia has really taken that to the next level. And a level so high, the rest of the world is playing catch up. We have, of course, probably just as many, if not more, great hackers and great computer scientists in the United States. But to my knowledge, the United States government has not for 2 decades straight built an intentional cyber army up the way that Russia has. I could be wrong. Maybe they're so secretive we don't know. But it's hard to dispute that even if the United States does have a cyber army, the size and skill level of the Russians are beating us anyway. Much the same way the Russians were beating the United States in the first space race, up to a point. What are some of the things you've heard about? The 2016 presidential election, meddling in the West, meddling with the Brexit vote, false news, false flags. Everybody's heard about the Russian trolls. Russian trolls rule. Russian trolls are everywhere. There are whole warehouses of Russians. There are warehouses where packed full of Russian trolls who just go out and spam and scam nonstop all Western news sites, Western governments, Western banks, Western business. And by the way, China's doing it too, but nobody does it like Russia does it. China and other kind of conventional world powers, they do cyber hacking to, make a political point, but maybe to steal secrets. Stealing secrets used to be the thing. Russia's the first group that I know of that put together a cyber army just to influence. That's why the trolls are out of control from Russia, because it's a business to them. They are manipulating. They are using not just propaganda, but false information and planting news stories and filling up chat rooms with negative talk and planting seeds that Hillary and Bill Clinton murdered 75,000 people. I mean, all of these weird things that we're like, who the hell believes that? Well, nobody really believes it the first time you hear it, but when you have chat rooms and people and stories that come out all over Facebook that suggest these things, people are like, oh, well, I mean, it's printed in 500 places or 5,000 places, so it must be true. That's what Russia really excels at now, is influencing. via their hacking. They probably steal lots of stuff too, but influencing. Case in point that you probably never heard about. You heard about the election stuff in the U.S. and maybe even about Brexit. But the Lisa case, just to influence German public opinion and take a pot shot at Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany for a very long time, which Putin never liked. A falsified story was planted everywhere in Germany that a young woman was beaten up and raped by a bunch of Syrian refugees that Angela Merkel led into the country. It was a completely false story, but it had legs, and there are millions of people who believe that's true right now. And it turned, I won't say it turned a tide, but it turned public opinion against Angela Merkel in a very big way, and her immigration policies were voraciously attacked by Germans because of a false flag news story that was done by the Russians. I mean, this is really powerful stuff. One could see that how that kind of thing even fueled the new rise of the neo-Nazis in Germany. Stuff like that has repercussions in the real world, and Russia's quite good at it. Cyber attacks happened even during the Russia-Georgian War. The Russians are really good. Their cyber hackers are so good, they can kind of strategically go in and shut down electric grids and shut down things as a prelude, shut down the Facebook for Georgia as a prelude to Russian maneuvers or any sort of Russian movement into an area. You got to think that Ukraine's been getting hacked nonstop for the last decade, and it was really ramped up for what's happening right now in Ukraine. Here, February 9th, 2022, that's just a couple weeks ago, European, U.S. regulators tell banks to prepare for Russian cyber attack threats. Russian invasion of Ukraine could redefine cyber warfare. It's a big, big deal. Oh, I'm sorry, we got some chats? Okay, chats. Let's see. Do you think war is imminent with the next few... Oh, shit, there's way too many chats now. I always think war is imminent, Ashley, but between who is the question. Let's see. H. Muam says, India and Pakistan cooperating. They're cooperating, yes, with the SCO. Geography Lady says, besides economics, how does demographics and a 1.5 fertility rate play into Putin's thinking? Very, very well played, Geography Lady. I think the same thing. In one fell swoop, Russia, if they took over Ukraine, could increase their population by 30 million people, and their population is shrinking. So one of the only ways that Russia can now increase their population to keep, people signing up for the military and paying taxes and keep the country going is to either encourage people to have sex more, which they've been trying to for 20 years. They hang a picture of Vladimir Putin in every woman's bedroom. That should have done it. But it didn't. And the only other way you can get your population to increase is go take over other people. And that perhaps is part of the thinking here. I would not doubt it. It's certainly not a negative from the Russian perspective to gain 20 or 30 million taxpayers, right? Victor Tango says, could renewed fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh open a new and larger geopolitical front, considering that pro-Armenian Russia mediated a ceasefire between them and Azerbaijan? Yeah, actually, Victor Tango, I was really surprised by Russia's play in that, but that's a whole nother side story that most people don't know a whole lot about, so I can't explain it. I actually thought that might have been an opportunity for Russia to get re-involved in another country there in the Caucasus region, but they did not. They kind of helped with a ceasefire. I don't know why I got tongue-tied on that. So maybe that's maybe for next year. Maybe that's 5 years from now where Russia's going to reconnect with Armenia and help them out. So that one really confuses me. I don't have a good answer for you. Muhan says, would India join a NATO SCO considering recent India-China tensions? Unknown. Good question. Would they even be invited? If China and Russia were to change the SCO into more of a military organization, would India even be invited to join? Pakistan probably would be, but I don't know about India. India is its own entity. Other smaller countries can be influenced to join a bigger entity if it benefits them, but India is a big country, and it probably does not behoove them, and they have historic animosity with China, so I don't know if they'd even be invited if it becomes a military thing. Thirsty Beta says Russia has Ed Snowden. I totally forgot about that dude. They do. Maybe that's where all the good hacking is coming from. Ashley's calling out, it's genius, subtly manipulating and planning information online to cause major changes. Absolutely. The internet and people on the internet are gullible and easily influenced. And most people do not do any more research after reading an inflammatory headline. I agree. That's why I try to stay away from the damn internet. Except to call out news stories and assess things. Geography Lady says, so maybe the cyber army is Putin's answer to declining demographics. Right? And Pet Frog is thinking about that. Okay, but to finish off, I really thought I was going to make it in an hour. We're already over 10. But I had said earlier in yesterday's part 1 that Vladimir Putin was prime minister to prez to prime to prez. So he's prime minister, appointed prime minister in 1999, became president in 2000. But I already told you, the Russian Constitution only allowed for 2 4-year terms for its president. So in 2008, Vladimir Putin was appointed prime minister under the elected president Medvedev. I loved Medvedev. I wish he'd have hung around more. I thought he was a good guy. He actually came to Silicon Valley. He got on Twitter. He started a Twitter handle because we already had a fake plaid Medvedev Twitter handle that everybody hit up after it was reported that he joined Twitter. Like 10 million people hit us up on our fake plaid account. So for the 4 years he was prime minister, they decided to change the Russian constitution to make it 6-year presidential terms instead of 4-year presidential terms. Okay. And in doing so, it was ruled by the Supreme Court of Russia that, well, Putin only served 2 4-year terms. And so and then we changed that. So now he can actually serve 2 6-year terms because the rules changed. So that's how he got back into power in 2012. And he will not have to leave power, wink, wink, until 2024 when his second 6-year term ends. You stay with me on all the math here? But let's be honest, he ain't going anywhere in 2024. They will either change the Constitution again or just not care. They're pretty much at the point of don't care. He will be president for the rest of my life, and or the rest of his. I don't know who's going to go first. I'm betting me. So we have a 22, the double deuce. Presidential run of Vladimir Putin has seen stabilizing Russian economic chaos of previous decades and strengthening their economy hugely because of oil and other things, and insulating their economy from all the sanctions that are getting ready to hit against them. They don't need to care. They've insulated, they've shored up the need to import financial stuff or many other things from the rest of the world. They have looked eastward, partnered up with China, and become a leader in other parts of Eurasia. So quite frankly, the stuff that the U.S. and the Team West is trying to do, most of us are just kind of shrugging, saying it's not really going to change the equation much because the Russian economy is kind of okay right now. It's not as big as the U.S., but it's doing okay. The main thing he's done is restored Russian pride, and this is why he has such huge approval ratings. He has made Russians proud to be Russian again, and that's huge. The same way that Xi Jinping has oversaw Chinese people becoming proud to be Chinese people again. They are now, and both of these leaders are in countries that have a strong degree of national pride. They're back on top again. He's consolidated political power within Russia and increasingly in his periphery. He's destroyed all dissent within Russia. He has restored Russia as a world power player. And this is an old graphic, 7 years old, that I won't even really put up too much. Just shows you the difference from when he took over and 15 years later, just the GDP. The GDP was 195 billion when he took over. Now it's 2.1 billion. And actually, that's a 7-year-old graphic. It's probably more like 4 billion now. GDP per person, $1,320 US. 15 years later, 14,800. I'll just stop right there. I mean, obviously, all the numbers go up. So the average Russian sees their lives improving, and they see this guy is the main reason it has improved. And now we're up to now. Putin's impact on planet Earth. And the now is they just invaded Eastern Russia. Putin orders forces to separatist areas after they claim independence, and he recognizes their independence. However, playbook number 4. There you go. It's the same playbook. There's Russians there. They want to be independent. They claim they're independent. They need our help. We have to go help the Russians in Luhansk and Donetsk. We have to. We don't have a choice. He actually made a really fiery speech yesterday, too, like almost angry. Signed a decree allowing troops to enter the 2 regions shortly after announcing that he would recognize their independence. Mr. Putin delivered an emotional and aggrieved address laying claim to all of Ukraine as a country created by Russia, and it was stolen from us by the West. That's what he truly believes, and even if he doesn't believe it, he's using that as leverage to, again, regain power in Russia's periphery for security reasons primarily, but also for national pride reasons. And strategic regions and strategic, resources. All of these things make it an easy play for him to want to do it, and he's just going by the playbook. The question is, where's the next play? We know the playbook now. Where's he going to play that next, okay? Putin has already won, as I've suggested in many lectures now. He's won because Russia is now a premier world power once more. It was not 20 years ago. It certainly wasn't 30 years ago. So Russia's back in the limelight. The whole world is waiting with bated breath to see what Vladimir Putin and Russia will do next. And you see little areas that are popped up here where it's influenced: Chechnya, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Syria, Donbass, Crimea, Belarus, Venezuela and Cuba. Really? Here was the story I tried to quote earlier. Putin to Ukraine, marry me or I'll kill you. Remember? Here, look, we got the EEU. We got the SCO. You want to come over with us? We're going to give you passports. Come on. And you're not going to do it? Then we're just going to invade you and kill you until you become my girlfriend. Vladimir Putin vows to stop color revolutions after sending troops to Kazakhstan. That was just 2 months ago. No more color revolutions. Why? Because he doesn't want any color revolutions happening inside of Russia either. So there's reasons why. He doesn't want to see other groups popping up. He doesn't want to see pro-democracy movements. They look at all that and suggest that all that is, it's all just being fueled by the West. None of the people of Ukraine, none of the people of Kazakhstan really want to have an uprising. It's just the West that's planting those seeds. Again, do they believe that? I don't know, but that's what they promote. And he certainly doesn't want to see anyone within Russia getting the fanciful idea of having a democracy. Something that him and Xi Jinping of China share. All right. This is also a playbook number 4 or number 5 at this point, but I don't know if any of you all heard just last year, ended 2020 and 2021, that Lukashenko, President Lukashenko, I know there's so many Lukashenko here, Shenko there, President Lukashenko is the dictator of Belarus. We haven't even talked about Belarus. And there was Belarusian uprising that started just last year, again, into 2020, 2021, because this guy's been in power for like 30 years. He's an idiot. He's an imbecile. He's a tin-pot dictator. He's a dork. And Belarus is stagnated, and enough people finally like, can you just leave? They didn't even say it was pro-democracy. They're just, can you just leave? Can you stop being in power of our country because you suck? And enough people started protesting, and he doubled down. He faked an election. Every election he's ran in has been nonsensical. He supposedly won the last one by like 80 points. And it's like, nobody even likes you. You couldn't win by 80% of the vote or 90%, some outrageously stupid number. And so anyway, at the end of that day, facing biggest challenge ever to his power, Lukashenko looks to Russia for help. And Putin and Lukashenko agree to deepen economic ties amid sanctions. And guess what happened last month? Russian forces moved into Belarus on the Ukrainian border with Belarus. And then last week I reported those Russian forces aren't leaving Belarus. They're there to stay. So you could be seeing the merger of Belarus right back into Russia too. It's already a puppet. Putin may not even need to physically take over Belarus. It's already a puppet state. But they might be like, well, you're a dork. You're out of here. You're just going to be a new sub-state. You might actually see President Lukashenko of Belarus put forward a measure to his own Congress to rejoin a Russian state. That would actually not surprise me at all. In order for him to maintain power for the rest of his life, he's going to need Putin and Russian military there to support him until he's dead, because enough Belarusians hate him. So that's going on in the background as well. Putin's got his hand in Belarus now, basically fully in control of it. And now, to finish, a little world tour. This was at the Olympics not too long ago. Vladimir Putin hails Russia's unprecedented close ties with China. Xi and Putin urge NATO to rule out expansion as Ukrainian tensions rise. They met on the sidelines of the Olympics last month. Putin now pushing Russian power abroad. He has visited with North Korea multiple times. Russia has claimed half of the Arctic Sea all the way up to the North Pole, something I reported on back in 1999, I think. Russia is a rising military power in Asia Pacific. Australia is starting to get worried with the amount of Russian naval activity that's occurring in the Pacific, which has never occurred before. Never. Even when great Soviet Union was strong, they didn't dally in the Pacific that much. They are now. Putin visits Ankara as bilateral relations continue to deepen with Turkey. That might be changing, as we pointed out. Russia has been visiting Egypt's Sisi, striking nuclear deals with Egypt, a long U.S. ally. Egypt now may be changing to favor Russia. Iran and Russia put on a show of unity against the U.S. Oh, that's so long ago, January 19th, 2022. That was a month ago. 1 month ago, before all of this stuff we're talking about now in Ukraine, Putin was in Iran, firming up ties with what is the biggest thorn in the U.S. side, besides Russia itself, is Iran. Strengthening ties with that super conservative, autocratic / dictatorial state. So you see the tendrils of Putin power and Putin influence branching out to lots of different places. And this is all, the only story that caught me off guard is this one right here. Putin now pushing Russian power back fully abroad globally. Last week, the president of Brazil visited Moscow to hang out with Vladimir Putin. And Russia is now courting Latin America. They're dusting off ties with Venezuela and Cuba and Brazil. Brazil has never been a pro-Russian state, ever. But the leader of that state, again, looks adoringly at the autocratic rule of Putin and wants to do that for Brazil. So that was shocking. I mean, in the middle of all of this, getting ready to invade Ukraine, which Putin certainly knew was happening, he's still expounding and pushing Russian influence to other states that he's never even had influence in, like Brazil. So I think that's all I got to say about that. The Putin pluses, that's Putin in a nutshell. The Putin pluses: stabilized Russia economically and politically, restored Russian pride, restored Russia as a world power player. Living standards have rose across the board. Separatism and terrorism have been completely contained within Russia. But of course, that comes with a cost, and the cost is at what cost to individual human liberties and human rights. It's hard to see how there are any left in Vladimir Putin's Russia. Putin's Russia can only win by others losing, specifically Team West. That's a little troublesome. So your country's based on hacking and oil. I mean, they're making money, but how long can that last? It's not really a sound economic principle to suggest that we only gain if everybody else loses, so we're going to work really hard so everybody else loses. Interesting. They've invented the cyber warfare, their most valuable export, which is changing the entire world, and I would suggest not in good ways. It's hard to see how any good comes of cyber warfare for anybody. Destroying dissent and free press breeds corruption within Russia. When a handful of people hold all the power and everybody's too scared to do anything about it, corruption just reigns. It's kind of a one-to-one scenario. It always happens that way. And of course, what we're seeing unfold specifically in the last 24 hours is Putin is now challenging the entire global rules system. Is this the end of the United Nations? Is this the end of sovereignty as we know it in the 20th and 21st century? Are all rules off? And we're just going to start building empires by force like the good old days / the not so good old days, right? Nationalism is now trumping globalism, and Vladimir Putin is the spokesman for this, and he ain't alone. My personal opinion for a decade now has been, I don't really have that much against Vladimir Putin per se. He's in control of Russia. They're a sovereign state. They have national pride. They've got all this stuff. Good for them. The main problem with Putin that I have seen is that the allure of successful strongmen in other societies. All of these countries, these leaders up here, including Trump, are mimicking or desirous of this sort of system which quashes human liberty, human rights, press, democracy. All that goes in the waste bin of history so that I can be in charge and have a conservative, good old days state again. And that's problematic. It's problematic for people that like democracy. It's problematic for people that respect human rights. It's problematic because it's spreading, because his success makes it more desirable for other autocratic leaders to follow suit. That's what's problematic for me. And in Russia, as already pointed out, Stalin is the most outstanding figure in world history, followed by Putin in all polls that have occurred in Russia for the last 20 years. So a dictatorial, psychotic leader, Stalin, is now looked upon as one of the greatest people that ever led our country because we were strong. And you're like, okay. Has the ghost of Stalin returned with the advent of Vladimir Putin? I think it's a safe bet to suggest that. He is the 21st century equivalent of Stalin, making the country proud at some cost to individuals. And of course, Stalin would say, I like this Putin fellow, just needs more stash. He needs to grow a better mustache. And is it that Stalin has returned, or are we merely seeing the return of an immortal Vlad? I was inspired to find this meme after I suggested that Vladimir Putin might be a vampire and been in control of Russia for the last 600 years. And as back to our good friend Forrest Gump, Vladimir Putin, he's back, he's in charge, and that's all I got to say about that. All right. Any comments, questions? Thank you all for tuning in to our part two of our Putin redo since we got kicked offline last week. Let's see. I got Pet Frog's looking up at that comment. Only here for the podcast says, what practical differences are there for Putin between having puppet states like Belarus versus outright controlling former Soviet territories? Are there incentives one way or the other? I would say only here for the podcast that physically taking over Belarus makes Putin appear to be a dictator. Allowing Belarus to maintain its sovereign state facade while it's truly just a puppet state makes him look like a benevolent leader. Remember, many of the places in Eastern Europe were puppet states of great Soviet Union back in the day. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, they were sovereign states. And so they had seats at the United Nations. And they got to behave like sovereign states. Everybody knew they were puppet states, but the Soviet Union and its leaders could claim, no, we're not, they're independent. We're not making them do anything. They're supporting us. They just love us. Remember, you want to have as many sovereign states as possible on your team. If for nothing else, to show support for your team. So when Russia invades the rest of Ukraine, it at least has Belarus that will say, we support that. If you absorb Belarus, then there's nobody else to say they're there to support you. So yeah, having puppet states is much more of a benefit, I think, for Putin, because then he can make this claim to this fairy tale that all these places really want to be part of Russia, and Russia really is great, and they're, everybody's just coming back into the fold because Russia's so awesome. Ferox765 says, do you think that Russia and China's individual interest, Do you think that Russia and China's individual interests could lead to conflict between them at some point? Absolutely. I think that there's all kinds of potential conflicts between Russia and China, not the least of which is that there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Chinese people that are slowly moving over the border in northeastern China into what is Russia's sovereign territory. And China at any given point could make the same claim that Russia is. China today could be like, hey, this northeastern fringe of our country, there's a whole bunch of Chinese, there's a million Chinese people on the other side. Therefore, even though it's Russia's territory, there's Chinese people there. So it's actually Chinese territory now. We have to protect Chinese people. Chinese people there, we got to protect Chinese people. So this play, the Putin playbook, is working really well for him right now, but it could come back to bite him in certain ways. And China is the main one it could bite him in. Ashley correctly points out corruption isn't a problem for Putin himself if he's in control. Absolutely. Absolutely. Corruption is mostly bad for a society because it makes a society stagnant. So overall, things go downhill for the average people and eventually even for the rich people if the economy just sucks. Ashley says you're going to see the resurgence of nationalism across the entire world. I wonder if cyber warfare affects this as well. Yes, I believe most people, the common clave, as we call them here on planet Earth, live in such a discombobulated, scary, misinformed time that they are reverting. They are easy to revert back to, we want the good old days. We want a strong leader to set things right. And I don't want to have to think about things. I want Vladimir Putin to decide everything because everything's getting better. As long as things are getting better for society, they'll let the person in charge keep going. If the average Chinese person, the average Russian, or the average American, if their lives are getting better, they'll just let whoever's in charge keep going. Why would you stop it if the average person's life is getting better? It gets tricky in Russia and China because economically things could be getting better, but you now don't have a free press. You don't have any democratic rights at all. And at any given time when the government changes or some crazy person gets into power or, just the president of the country decides he doesn't like you or your family, well, then you're dead. So it's great that things are getting better, but in China and in Russia, but at what cost? And I would rather be living in a society that I was eking out a living, but at least I had recourse if a police officer bribed me or shot me or the government seized my property. At least I would have recourse in a democratic society. In China, if a local strongman doesn't like you, you're just dead. He wants to steal your wife. If the president of China wants to take your wife, say goodbye to your wife. I mean, that's the difference between true democracies and these other places that even pretend to be democracies is, do you really have the right of recourse? Is there really the rule of law that applies to everybody in the society, top to bottom? And in true democracies, it's still true. Yes, the rule of law does apply. In these other countries, not so much. And those kind of countries scare me a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't want to live there for fear of retribution. Remember, I'm a loudmouth who's doing a podcast right now. I dress this way. This could be enough to get me jailed, maybe, in parts of the world. If I were to be gay or stand up for gay rights, there are parts of the world I would go to jail in, like some of the ones I'm mentioning. If I spoke up against a regime, or I did a podcast where I said, oh, this president really sucks, in parts of the world, you can go to jail or die for that. I mean, I guess I value free expression and individual human liberties and rights more than I favor a better economy. And that's all up to individuals. I'm not saying people that favor a better economy are worse people than me. If you're poor, you favor a better economy. If you're poor and hungry, you give zero shits about human rights. You're hungry. I get it. But I'm not hungry. And most of our country is not hungry. I know there are some people that are, but most of the people of our country and democracies are not hungry. And so we do value those things over a bigger, better economy. And that's all I got to say about that. Okay. Mexican Goose says, do appearances even matter anymore when it comes to looking as like a dictator? Why at this point should he care? Because you always want to, Mexican Goose, even if you are truly a dictator and you truly do have your boot on people's necks, you at least want to still believe that they love you. You still want to favor the idea that people are willingly agreeing with you, that they actually do like you, they do like your leadership, they do want to join the team. And so I think that's just a inherent human thing. You get into full-on dictators when they don't care about that anymore. That's when you get your Stalins and your Hitlers where they're like, I really don't give a shit if anybody likes me or not. I'll kill everybody. You're like, okay, buddy, slow down. That's when it gets scary. So I don't think Putin has crossed that line, and I don't think he ever will. I think he does value the respect that comes with being a leader that people want to follow, not a leader that you smash people's skulls in to make them follow you. First time chatter from Gree Girl says, yay, hoping you were lecturing on this current event. I think I just did. I don't know if you just joined, but we've already talked for an hour and a half, so we're wrapping it up now. But it's on here recorded on Twitch. Ashley says China will absolutely do that if given the chance. Agreed. Good old days. Also, if he comes off too strongly as a dictator, he could lose public favor potentially. Yes. If you overplay your hand as a dictator in what's supposed to be a free society, then that can also cost you in public perception and public respect. And ultimately, if you're still holding elections, even if they're fake, it becomes harder to hold fake elections. Look next door at Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. He's such an idiot, he actually thought people liked him. And they keep running these fake elections. And so, and they're cheating just to keep the big dumb galoot in power, his people around him. And so when the people took to the streets of Belarus a year and a half ago, he was shocked. He's like, but everybody loves me. This is impossible. It must be the West fueling this because everyone loves me. And it's like, oh my God, some people are so delusional. A lot of these leaders just get absolutely delusional that everybody loves them. How could it be? I often think of what's happening in Burma again. It's under military dictatorship because the military dictatorship took over in the 1960s, ruled brutally for decades. There was a pro-democracy movement in Burma. In 1988, they said, the military dictatorship said, well, everybody loves us so much. We'll go ahead and allow an election with this nonsensical democratic uprising, which of course nobody likes because everybody loves the military. So we'll hold an election. They held the election and everybody voted for the democratic, liberated, free people, like 90%, and the military was shocked. And so they brutally repressed it again. Then 20 years after that, they said, okay, we're going to open the country back up again. This is just 10 years ago now. All right, we're going to open up the country again, and we'll allow elections, but we learned a little bit from last time. So we're going to put it in our Constitution that like half the legislature has to be ex-military people. So they fixed it, right? And then 2 years ago, they held another election, and shockingly, 99% of people voted for the pro-democracy and didn't vote for any of the military people. Again. And the military's like, what? But everybody loves us. Obviously, this is fake. So they had clamped down and did the military dictatorship again and put all the pro-democracy people in jail. You're like, how are these people in power so delusional? They, at some point, just believe their own bullshit, and they have underlings working for them who prop up the bullshit, so that's all they see. That's definitely Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. Nobody really likes this dude. He's been there for 30 years, and he's a fool. Anyway, didn't mean to go off on that diatribe. Let me summarize by saying good night. Thank you all so much. Unless there's any other questions. Any other questions? From Benman says, I doubt China would carve out a section of Russia since they're both nuclear powers. Ukraine doesn't have nukes. Point taken. Another reason why everybody's going to want more nukes in the future, so that you have the ultimate weapon that prevents people from invading you. Also food for thought. But any other questions before we wrap this up? Mexican Goose says, how long does it take for a giraffe to throw up? I guess it depends on what they ate. How violently is the throwing up going to occur? Ashley says, when you live in a bubble, it's easy to convince yourself you're always right. That is true. A lot of these leaders live in bubbles. Victor Tango says, thanks for sharing this link on the Seattle Hokies alumni page. Actually, yeah. When I put it on Facebook, it said, hey, do you want to put this in this page too? And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. I guess I shouldn't hate Facebook as much as I do. Psych. Well, welcome, Victor Tango. I didn't know you were in the Seattle area. Welcome, West Coasters and East Coasters and all the coasts in between, which is no coast. Thanks, Ashley. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you liked this. If you did, then do the subscribe or like or link or I don't know, whatever the kids do nowadays. And by the way, we've now talked about Ukraine and Putin for like 6 lectures to a total of 12 to 15 hours. So we should switch it up next week. Email me what topic outside of Ukraine and Vladimir Putin would interest you. There's other things going on in the world that are interesting that don't need to have 5 to 10 hours of lecture behind them. So let's pick something new. Let's go someplace new for next week in a new current event, whatever it is, whatever the case may be. Hit me up and let me know what that is, and I'll pick something for you next Plaidcast. Same Plaid time, same Plaid channel next Monday. Signing off as the Plaid Avenger. Thank you all so much, and as always, party on.